So, the last time I covered Gale's Romance was back in patch 2, and I'm happy to say there's been improvements, not only with the animations and bugs, but also with how the whole relationship feels. It's hard to say whether that's because this time I knew the Mystra bit was coming, or because they actually changed some things to make it better. I managed to get an extra bit of dialogue this time prior to the romance, and I think that helped a lot too. I'm also going to say that in the game's current state, romancing Gale can be a bit of a pain. I had to jump through a lot of hoops getting his rep up in the Grove by picking all of the good and considerate choices, while making sure to rest after hitting each milestone of approval increase. There is one scene in particular, though, that you absolutely must see in order to progress the romance: the weave scene. But you can't see it until getting his other scenes to proc first. There's one about going to hell, and then there's the mirror image encounter. At medium approval, you can get the Dear Stew scene, where he talks about needing artifacts. By the time you hit high approval, you should be able to get the weave scene to show up. But the big issue is that if you have other companions, which you most certainly do in a game like this, then their scenes can override Gale's scenes. For instance, I was partying with Lae'zel and Astarion, and each time their quest would show up first. I kept doing small things like turning in a quest or getting into a fight with mobs, and then resting again to see if the scene had cycled through yet. To be honest, I'd like to see them just show all of the quests at the same time, or at the very least make it so that the scenes don't just disappear after the story has moved far enough ahead. It seems that by the time the camp has been more established, that you lose the chance to get the weave scene. I might be wrong about this though, but in my experience, past a certain point, it doesn't show up anymore. As it stands now, it's just very tricky. One way to make sure it happens more easily is to only recruit Gale, but that isn't very fun. Still, it's an option. Might I also mention before I continue that this video has a ton of spoilers, and is mostly meant for those who have already seen the romance from a previous patch, or those who want to see it in its current state without playing it. So now that we've covered all of that, let's get on to the good stuff. I bet most of you would be surprised to know that Gale is actually my second favorite romance, even though he can be incredibly cringy at times.
K9 is charged.
And he was the first character I ever romanced in BG3. I actually really liked him until finding out about the whole Mystra thing, because it completely blindsided me. If you go through another game though, you realize you have to be blind to miss the cues. Like when you guys have the Illithid dream, it's quite obvious that Gale is dreaming about Mystra, and that he even gave in to her. Even during the weave scene when he is looking at the image of Mystra like a longing lover, it's just, well, pretty obvious if you're looking for it. Maybe not so much if you don't know what you're looking for though. Gale has a lot of content for his romance too. There's a lot of extra scenes as well as bonus dialogue after the scenes. So this video might be a tad long. I'll be sure to make some links for those who want to skip around as well. The first big chance to really flirt with Gale is during the weave scene. As I mentioned earlier, without it, there will be no way to romance him at the camp celebration. This scene is probably one of my favorites in the entire game at the moment. It's seriously awesome, so let's take a look.
Oh. My, you startled me. I was miles away. Of course. I was just practicing an incantation. She does. She's Mystra. Can't quite describe it. The need I sometimes feel to see her, to draw the filaments of fantasy into existence. No sculpture or painting could ever do her justice. Only the fabric that she herself is and embodies. The weave. Mystra is all magic. As far as I'm concerned, she is all creation. I see you understand. Magic is my life. I've been in touch with the weave for as long as I can remember. There's nothing like it. It's like music. poetry, physical beauty, all rolled into one and given expression through the senses. Is it the same for you? Perhaps we can share the experience by reaching into the weave together. Then follow my lead. Now you.
A familiar feeling, like a kind word and a kind touch at the same time. It's warm and comfortable.
Excellent. Now, repeat after me. Athran Mystra Ril Kantrak Eo.
Ah, yes. The scent of rosewater and a sense of well-being. A sliver of weave that tastes sweet on the tongue.
Very good. Now, I want you to picture in your mind the concept of harmony, as true as you can.
You see, or is it sense, the unmistakable presence of Mystra, the Lady of Mysteries. There's something like the anticipation of a kiss, then the pleasure of being cloaked in peace. You are safe. You are nestled in the cup of Mystra's hand.
Look at that. We're channeling the weave. How does it feel? That it does.
The weave connects you. The moment feels intimate. You realize the weave is making you one. You have but to imagine your desire, and Gale will know it.
I didn't think.
You perceive quick-fire gusts of embarrassment, trepidation, and finally, elation.
Sorry, I wasn't expecting. But it is a pleasant image, to be sure. Most pleasant, in fact. Most welcome.
The weave evaporates, and as it does so, you realize the night feels suddenly cold and lonesome.
Oh. There it goes. How easily things slip away from us, no matter how hard they were in the obtaining. Good night. I enjoyed sharing a moment of magic with you.
To reiterate, it's been a very long time since I've actually seen this, going back to patch 2. Experiencing that moment with Gale in the weave, the point when he asks you how it feels. Part of me wants to be cynical and pick the wizard option, how it always feels, duh. But the part of me that's being honest can't ever pick anything besides magical because it absolutely is. Maybe I'm being a complete nerd here, but I cannot help but feel completely wrapped up in him. In the weave swirling around us. It's freaking amazing. It reminds me a lot of the feeling I get when I see dragons done really well in a game or a movie. Maybe you know the feeling I'm talking about. You just get this dumb smile on your face, and it's usually accompanied by a shiver down your arms. That's how watching the scene affected me, at least. There are just some things in this world that never lose their luster, that remain magical and wonderful for eternity. And that doesn't even touch on the intimacy shared between the two of you either. I mean, the idea of thinking something and the other person can just see it in their head, how amazing would that be? Although, if this were me in real life and not just a set of pre-selected choices, well, let's just say Gale would probably run away blushing. But seriously, it's just a really phenomenal moment, a good feeling. It makes me really appreciate the closeness that they've managed to create with the scene. You can also see there are no more T-poses for love, which makes me kind of sad, but it's a step in the right direction. I was very happy with the entirety of the progress this scene has made though, as well as the powerful feeling it evokes. And now that I've gushed enough, let's move on to the dialogue that shows up after the weave scene.
Oh, I was surprised, but pleasantly so. Just like I said, amid the madness that has befallen us, it seems almost out of place to think of a kiss. And yet, now more than ever, it's important to recall what makes us human. A stolen glance, that sudden heartbeat. Sometimes the little things are worth more than kingdoms. They promise things to come.
It's funny how going into this with a different perspective really changes how you view some of this dialogue. Gale's words about being pleasantly surprised and the rather poetic description of remembering to be human amidst chaos just makes me think now that he was probably so shocked to find himself enjoying a kiss with you in the first place. He is probably like, well, I thought Mystra was the only one for me, but now here's this new person that I'm finding myself really liking. It becomes quite clear to me that Gale can be painfully honest, even though the way he delivers the words sometimes sounds cryptic. Just take his words at face value though, and you'll start to understand him a lot more. He's talking about the promise of things to come with Tav, and I think he really means that, because he sounds so excited about the budding relationship between you two. The next scene is called Loss, and it can show up after high approval. Let's take a look-see.
Failure. Yes. You'd think I'd be used to it by now. It's getting late. I think I'll turn in. Perhaps some sleep will do me good. I simply have a lot on my mind. Please, just let it rest. So you did. Very well. Just now I was trying to cast a spell I once cast with ease, but as you pointed out, I failed. You see, this fire, there was a time that I could make it come alive, that it would take the shape of a dragon and roar in delight. There was a time I could silence a beholder with a word and lift a tower from its foundations with a flourish. There was a time I was all but one with the weave. But no more. A mere shadow of the wizard I used to be. Why? Because I've lost. I've lost. I've lost Mystra. I sought to impress her personally, to turn the eyes of my muse upon me, to win favor of a goddess. But I failed, and all I invoked was death and dismissal. My death, her dismissal. Thank you. You're a good friend. I often think of that moment we shared together. One under the weave. I'm glad to know you think about it too.
So here we learn that Gale used to be an archwizard. Arch. How the heck do you even say that? To be honest, I've always said arch, but I often hear people say arc. Well, whatever. He used to be a strong and crazy powerful wizard, and now he isn't. He is very cagey about the whole topic, and you have to keep gently prying to get him to open up about it. To get him to spill the beans, you have to pass the persuasion check, and in my past game, I wasn't able to. The roll is not very high here, but it might be because my stats are different this time around, or maybe I just had really bad luck. Whatever the reason, I never saw this confession initially. If you pass the roll, though, he'll actually tell you he's lost Mystra. He says he tried to impress her, calls her his muse, which is incredibly telling, and he says he tried to win her favor, but failed, ultimately leading to her shutting him out. I think if I had gotten this scene originally and passed the roll, that I would have been a lot more understanding, or at least not so surprised about his confession about Mystra later on. I like that he also brings up the moment we shared under the weave again. It's clear that it's on both of our minds at this point. We now get a new dialogue option after the scene where you can ask Gale more about Mystra abandoning him.
The weave is still here. All around us. Inside of us, too. As long as the goddess lives. Magic is a tangible thing for those who know how to touch. I've studied magic for many years, and in as many ways I am still a more than capable wizard. It's just that I am no longer able to perform those feats even arch-wizards would marvel at. To have one hand on the pulse of divinity. You have to remember that the weave is a living thing, both the embodiment and the extension of Mystra herself. She can give, and she can take away. I'm afraid I'm still very much on her naughty list. Consider yourself lucky you're not.
So we get a little more information about Mystra and about Gale's remaining abilities. It's interesting too because if you read between the lines, there is one part where he mentions not being able to perform amazing feats and then mentions having one hand on the pulse of divinity. You can read that a couple of ways, but in my opinion, I think he's once again being blunt to a fault. He's basically telling you, yeah, Mystra and I were legit close. So not having the normal relationship that any other wizard might have with the weave and by extension her. You can also bring up the moment under the weave again and ask if he thinks about it often. Check it out.
Do you? So do I. You see, I'm not a big believer in fate, but I do believe in serendipity. Life is a tempest of events that sometimes we brace against and sometimes embrace. You're one such event that, one day soon perhaps, I'd like to embrace.
So he's definitely thinking about it a lot, and he's talking about serendipity, which, for those of you who might not be familiar with the term, it basically means when you end up with something really awesome that you weren't actually looking for. Some people also equate it with a fluke of good luck, but consider it more like this. You have a really bad breakup with your ex, and after dealing with their BS for years, you're just happy to be free. You decide you're not interested in finding someone new, and you just want to take a break from dating, period. So you stop looking. And just when you stop looking, you meet the guy or girl you end up marrying and spending the rest of your life with. So I think that choice of words is really telling here. Saying he doesn't believe in fate, but does believe in serendipity is like, well, I don't believe that things are just destined to happen with no ability to change them, but I do believe that sometimes really amazing things can happen when we least expect it. He talks about how crazy life is, how things just happen one after the other, and sometimes you hate them and you fight back, but sometimes you're really happy with what you get and you accept it. He's totally happy with you and what's occurred between you unexpectedly. He's hoping you two will become even closer in the near future, too. I think all of this is really progressing along nicely, don't you? Sounds like a really well-spoken and romantic idealist kind of guy. And now we're down to the nitty-gritty of it, the camp celebration where all of the magic happens.
Thank you. There's that confidence I like. I thank you for seeking me out. Amidst all this merriment, I wasn't sure we'd have a chance to speak this evening. I wasn't sure we'd have a chance to make merry, just the two of us. As they say in Waterdeep, in wine there is truth. That's usually followed by, in water there is good sense. Good sense will have to wait till tomorrow. We shared a romantic moment of the mind while cloaked in the weave, didn't we? And I seem to recall a fond allusion to that moment afterwards. Allow me to make the following proposition. There's a book that circulates in Ulm, detailing the first 1,000 nights of a newlywed king and queen. They turned everything they did into an art. The art of conversation. The art of taste. Time-honored and newly acquired. The art of the body. The exploration and acceptance of the self and the other. The art of the night itself. I say we take a page from their book. Forget the book, then. Let's be blank slates on blank sheets, delightfully new. What do you say? That's because I'm full of delights. We'll let the night run its course, and when everything is quieting down, safe in the arms of sleep, I'll come by to find safety in yours.
So not much has changed with the scene at all. I do think it feels a little more appropriate though, how direct he is about wanting to sleep with you. I remember initially when I made a video about this romance, I hadn't seen a lot of the scenes in between, and so it seemed as though he was all surprised at the initial kiss during the weave scene and then suddenly direct at this point. Now the whole thing feels a lot smoother and much less surprising. I've still gotta say, I hate that line about being full of delights though.
That's because I'm full of delights.
It just feels so cheesy and out of place. And I'm pretty sure I complained about it in my last video too. Okay, now it's time for the romance scene itself, and you'll be happy to see the whole thing plays out without any major animation glitches now. I'll split this up into a couple of segments because it's really long.
I love this time of night. There's almost a reverent silence that accompanies the peak of darkness. And you'd almost believe the dawn will never break. I think there's a certain magic in it. The timelessness of lovers. That most beautiful of fantasies. You should tell me to shut up more often. I'm of the opinion one should try and excel at everything. How about we move on to everything? Good morning. Looks like the dawn broke after all. So much for the timelessness of lovers. It's all right. You look even more beautiful in the light. Like I said, I try to excel at everything. I know we have to get moving again soon, but before we part, I'd like to tell you something. I'd like to tell you a story.
I still really like the atmosphere of the scene, and I notice they've added little bugs that fly around the candles, looking almost like fireflies. But as Gale sits down, oh my god, fix that neck! Is it broken? Is she okay? My Tav's neck looks so unnaturally long in this scene that it is hard to listen to what Gale is even saying, but I'll try. So, first thing I really take note of here is that he's no longer kissing my eye. Woo! The dialogue also feels a lot better to me here, although I really hate how abruptly the scene ends. I would have liked to see more of the romance specifically, but I guess we're stuck waiting for that still as the dreaded under construction scene rears its ugly mug again. It's clear there is still some work left to be done on these scenes as Gale says good morning, and yet it's still nighttime out. I remember being a bit confused about what time of day it was supposed to be in Astarian's scene as well, but there is plenty of time for them to fix that up. One thing I have to make mention of here is I absolutely love this look on Gale's face right here. I think Gale is a pretty good looking guy, and this expression embodies this sort of snarky smirk with a bit of smoldering hotness as he turns around to look at Tav. I wish the animators would hit that look more often because it just makes me weak in the knees. I was so happy to see that they fixed all the movement animations here too. In the beginning of the scene in patch 2, Tav is awkwardly standing next to Gale, and when he goes to help her up, they get entangled on each other and just sort of spin around. Now Tav starts on the ground and Gale seamlessly helps her up. As the dialogue continues, I like how he keeps referring to how he likes to excel at everything. Tav is thinking she could get used to Gale about now. That is until he has to break the mood with the truth bomb. Let's get to it.
Point taken, but this time I can't. It's a story full of answers long overdue. It is the story of a man who fell in love with a goddess. Please, a bit of narrative distance will make it so much easier in the telling. Indulge me. Very well. The plain version it is. I am what one might call a wizard prodigy, who from an early age could not only control the weave, but compose it like a virtuoso. Such was my skill that it earned me the attention of Mystra herself. I soon fell in love with her, and she returned my affections. Youth is no time to be modest. Youth is a time to be proud, and to have one's pride dented. Before long, Mystra tired of me. What was I, after all, but a mortal plaything in sacred hands? You have to realize I was heartbroken. I was a young man. She was my first love. I thought it would last forever. I vowed to win her back. Of course, one has to think big if one seeks to win back a goddess. So I thought big. In a word, yes. Suffice to say, I obtained an obscure and ancient book that had locked away inside a much-coveted prize. It was a fragment of primal weave locked out of time, locked away from Mystra herself. What if, I thought, what if, after all this time, I could return this lost part of herself to the goddess? The answer was to try. And the outcome was to fail. Here. Place your hand over my heart. Let me show you.
You feel the tadpole quiver as you realize Gale is letting you into the dark. You see through Gale's eyes, staring down the corridors of a dread memory. A book, bound, then suddenly opened. Inside there are no pages. Only a swirling mass of blackest weave that pounces. Its teeth, its claws. It's unstoppable as it digs through you and becomes part of you. And gods, is it ever hungry.
Terrifying, isn't it? And that is only the beginning. This Netherese taint, this orb, for lack of a better word, is balled up inside my chest. And it needs to be fed. As long as it absorbs weave, it remains stable, to an extent. The moment it becomes unstable, however. Rather worse, actually. It will erupt. I don't know the exact magnitude of the eruption, but given my studies of Netherese magic, I'd say even a fragment as small as the one I carry, it'd level a city the size of Waterdeep. Yes, it is my truth, finally revealed. It is this folly that led Mystra to abandon me completely. I can only hope that you won't abandon me as well. After all we've been through, after the night we spent together, surely we can brave even this side by side. That is a great relief. Your apprehension is most warranted, but oh, a great relief this is indeed. I don't know what I did to deserve the magic that you do. Many challenges lie ahead, but in this moment I believe nothing to be insurmountable. The road awaits. Shall we? Or do you have questions for me?
So here it is, the story of how Gale fell in love with Mystra. Now, in my last video, this was about the time I was pretty pissed off. I had no idea about Mystra, was all sorts of lovey-dovey with my magical Gale, and then all of a sudden it was, hey, I slept with Mystra, I might still be in love with her. It just set off all my red flag alerts. I was not happy with him, and it pretty much soured my opinion on the romance for a long while. I'm glad I gave him another chance though, because after watching the entirety of the relationship as it progresses all over again, I'm left with a different impression that Gale just seems to be so much more genuine and interested in you. It doesn't come off like he's in love with Mystra, it's more like he's just being honest about it with you. And to be realistic, you definitely should have picked up on some of the indirect and direct signs he gave you. I feel like when you romance him now, you're doing it knowing that he's had some sort of an odd relationship with Mystra, and now you're going into it thinking, well, I don't know what happened between them, but I'll win him over. It just feels less like being betrayed when you know more going into it. I opted for him to tell me the plain version of the story this time, even though I know he probably didn't like it as much. He talks about being a magical prodigy and capturing the attention of Mystra and falling in love with her. When you choose to be snarky with him about being anything but modest, he has a nice response. He talks about being young and full of pride, and then getting that pride dented as he says Mystra got sick of him. He looks pretty scorned here, talking about how she thought he was just a plaything. I think the whole dialogue here presents the relationship between Gale and Mystra in a much different light too. And these aren't the words of a lovesick guy that's still hung up. These sound more like the words of a man that knows he was young and stupid, that didn't know any better. Even when he mentioned being heartbroken, he's talking about it as if it's far in the past, saying he was naive and in love, that he thought they'd be together forever. And it's funny too, because I realized he's only telling Tav this because it leads into explaining how the orb came to be stuck in his chest. I'm sure it would not be his first choice to talk about what happened between him and Mystra otherwise. I just think it upset me so much the first time he told me about it all the way back in patch 2 because I had missed other dialogue options that explained it more. And this time around it seems more expected and more understandable in terms of how he's telling you. The whole thing is just more feasible. I was so happy to see that the scene where he has you place your hand on his heart has been fixed. It was completely messed up before, and now it looks awesome. By the time his confession is completed, he tells you that this folly is the reason that Mystra left him completely, and he hopes that you won't abandon him as well. I never noticed it the first time around, but it really shows how insecure he is about love, and even acceptance by said lovers. It's obvious he holds a huge amount of shame for this entire event for his overwhelming pride, and he's really seeming prepared for the idea of you leaving him and never looking back, much like Mystra did. This is all proven by his response whether you accept him or tell him to go. If you accept him, he is beyond elated. They've added some more hand gestures to make him really come to life in his relief. He seems almost like a kid who got what he asked Santa for on Christmas Day, and that's good. I think it really lends towards the idea that he truly cares for you. He comes in for a kiss, which the animation looks so much better for, and I love how much Tav just looks so smitten and sweet here. It made me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. And if you do tell him to leave instead, it's absolutely heartbreaking. Take a look.
I see. I am sorry. I am sorry that it had to come to this. All that's left to say is farewell. Farewell.
He just says farewell with this forlorn bow, and once again, I feel like a horrible person. But as I've said in my other videos, sometimes you learn a lot by what these characters do when they have to leave, and this speaks volumes. It shows he was expecting the rejection as he accepts it so easily, and it shows an insane amount of sadness and regret that he has to leave. Afterwards, you get to ask him a few questions about everything he's talked about. You can even ask him more about Mystra. Is he still in love with her?
I'll be honest with you. I don't know. She's my muse still, the embodiment of magic. But the embodiment of love? Only if we ever meet again will I know. You don't. And a great compliment that is too. You are unique in your own right, and just as incomparable. The orb was kept safe and inert in a pocket of astral plane suspended in time. If I can somehow manage to expel it from my body while in the astral plane, it will be rendered inert again. Alternatively, I could learn to control its chaotic magic. That is, to succeed where I failed before. Without Mystra's favor, I don't see how that may come to pass. Of course, there could be different answers as well. Faerun brims with more magic than any one wizard could fathom, let alone comprehend. Who knows what outlandish solutions may yet present themselves. Here's to us, and to brand new adventures.
Once again, I'll say it's funny how perspective changes everything, because when I first asked him this, I was so hurt. All I could hear was, she is my muse still, and I'll only know if I still love her if we were to meet again. Of course, then I'm thinking, if he ever sees her again, he's going to leave Tav. That's messed up. But he's just being honest. He says as much directly. He even questions whether she's the embodiment of love or not, because he likely knows that she's not. Everything he's said up to this point suggests that she was the infatuation of a young man's heart. I mean, I can certainly relate. I had a boyfriend when I was young too, who was really good looking, smart, and every other good thing I could forcibly attribute to him because I was just smitten. In reality, he was a total jerk who didn't feel the same way about me, but still he wasted many of the best years of my life before I finally realized that. Looking back at the relationship, I always wondered what I saw in him. Why was I so in love with him? But that's infatuation for you. It masquerades as love. And I truly believe that is what happened between Gale and Mystra. I don't mean my exact story. I mean a misunderstanding of love that was just infatuation. We won't know for sure until more of the story unfolds. And I tell you what, I'm really excited to see if Mystra will actually make an appearance besides, actually being magic in the game. But it would be so cool to have that interaction with her, and to find out if she actually cared for Gale, or if perhaps something got in the way of her being able to contact him. Or maybe it was just as he said, and he was just her plaything. Regardless of all this, my point is that I think my initial response to finding out about Gale and Mystra was flawed. I don't think it was meant to say, hey, I don't care about you. Quite the opposite. By telling you about everything that happened, he's showing you how much he does care, how much he trusts you. He's putting himself on the line with a fear of being rejected by you entirely, and that's some heavy stuff. One of the things I love about the Gale romance is that there is so much extra dialogue. I really hope they eventually add it all to the other romances as well, but the day after you can talk to Gale and he will have this to say.
Go ahead. I'm listening. A night to remember. It was wonderful, wasn't it? I've had a goddess, but you don't hear me complaining. Before we go on, though, do first let me apologize. To share such a night with you only to tell you of a previous lover the next morning, it wasn't the most gentlemanlike behavior. But I had to finally tell you. Silence would have been far worse behavior still. Nevertheless, I am sorry. One shouldn't be all gentlemen, or we certainly wouldn't have done some of the things we did the other night. But you first approached me about the other night. What was it you wanted to tell me? We absolutely should. After all, I need to undo the misconception you've had better.
I absolutely adore this entire exchange. It's so cheeky. I love how telling both Gale and Astarion that you've had better gives you the funniest responses. Wouldn't you think they'd get pissed off and storm out? Instead, they both seem to take it so well. Gale's response about having been with a goddess but not complaining made me legit crack up. He apologizes again about talking about a previous lover on the night we were together, and I have to agree on the next part here that it would have been far worse to keep the secret. Still, I felt a lot better about it this time around, and so I felt like he didn't really need to apologize anymore here. The dialogue about being a gentleman was hysterical and gave me some serious respect for Gale's witty comebacks. I'm pretty sure my Tav was blushing after his remarks, too. Then, when you talk about wanting to do it again sometime, he goes back to what you said earlier about having had better, telling you he has to undo the misconception that you have. I had never seen this whole set of dialogue, so it really made me laugh. I think it does wonders to set the topic at ease, too. There is another dialogue option, too, about the Netherese magic that you can talk about right after that has some seriously sweet stuff in it, too. Let's look.
If it should ever come to that, if I ever know I am no longer able to stop it, I will do anything I can to ensure no one but me pays for my mistakes. I will find the remotest place on the surface of Faerun, or perhaps far below in the depths of the Underdark. I will await that death, alone. I promise I will not betray your trust. You kept me by your side despite the menace that I am. I cherish you. If worst comes to worst, I will be long gone before the curtain falls.
So he says he'll go far away, alone, to let himself erupt if it should ever come to that, so that he could keep casualties to a minimum. But what really gets me here is this line. I promise I will not betray your trust. You kept me by your side despite the menace that I am. He then says, I cherish you. Just wow. For one, it makes me feel really bad, just how poorly Gale sees himself. Sure, he has made some decisions that didn't work out entirely well, but he had good intentions. I hate to think of someone just looking at themselves as a menace. The negative places in your mind that you'd have to go to come out with that so readily. I feel like I want to work on his confidence and show him that he has a whole heck of a lot of value, even though I guess he is just pixels. He talks about his loyalty to you, which I think speaks more to how he might respond if Mystra were ever to show up again. He says quite plainly he won't betray you, and I think that would be a pretty massive betrayal if he left you the moment Mystra showed up again. I just don't think he would do it. Then there's that line about cherishing you. He really doesn't seem to take you for granted at all, and it just feels more serious. Like, his feelings for you are really solid and secure despite the uncertainty that came earlier. I'm just really happy with how this whole romance turned out. Everything played out in the right order, and I feel really satisfied with it. I think if Mystra ever did show up, there might be a slight wavering, but Gale strikes me as the type of person who would see things how they actually were and pick Tav. I don't know what the relationship Gale and Mystra had together was like, but the one he has with Tav is sure shaping up to be a good one, with serious emotions that could potentially grow into true love and not just a passing infatuation. I think I've spent too much time simping for Astarion because I haven't stopped to notice Gale and all of the potential he has as an amazing companion and lover. And then there's the story angle and the lore, which makes the whole thing very exciting. I was actually doing some research on the Netheril for another video and learned that Karsus was Netherese. I had actually gotten the dialogue in the game about Karsus's folly before, but I didn't have enough of the context to understand it. So when I was looking into the history of the Netheril, I was like, hey, I remember that from Gale's story, and there were lots of as I came to comprehend the whole thing. Still, Netherese magic has a huge connection to the tadpoles and the force controlling them, so being that Gale has that chunk of magic in his chest as well, he's likely going to have a very connected role in the story that's coming, or at least I hope he does. As I mentioned earlier, I'd really love to see if Mystra actually makes a cameo in the game as well. There's a lot of really cool things that could happen as it all unfolds. So what do you all think? Does seeing everything in this order help you to swallow the confession about Mystra a little more easily? I actually found it didn't bother me at all when I looked at it with less biased eyes. Getting to see that added scene past the persuasion check really helped too, because it made me feel more like I was aggressing him despite having to potentially compete with a goddess. Like, well, screw her, I'm gonna win him over. I really can't wait for Larian to release more of the story and the romances though. I am dying to see where these paths all lead. Who will be the more satisfying romance in the end? Will it be Astarion or Gale? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I think it's going to be hard to choose between them because they are both so awesome in their own right, besides those awful cheese balls that Gale drops. Ugh. That's all for now. I'm still working my way through the romances again, as well as putting together some other pieces, so keep an eye out for more. I also wanted to make a quick shout out to my patrons. Thank you so much for your support. If any of you would like to join the family, you can click my Patreon link in the info section below. Every little bit helps, and you'll get access to more updates as well as unfiltered content. See you guys later!